This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast and community for creative people who value and enjoy working alone. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Your Own Best Company. I am Franklin Taggart, and this podcast is my idea. I'm welcoming back my good friend, Joanie Connell. She was here a little while back talking about all of these different assessments that are out and about in the world today and what we can learn from them. And one of the ones that she kind of singled out as one of her favorites is one called CliftonStrengths. And just before we get jumping into that, Joanie, welcome back.
Thank you, Franklin. It's a pleasure to be here.
What is it you like so much about CliftonStrengths?
Well, I love it because it's positive.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a quick story because, honestly, the reason why I got involved in the CliftonStrengths is because I do so much assessment, and I would give people the results of their assessments. And, if there was anything negative, people would just jump to that so often, like high achieving people, they would just jump to the negative. And I'm saying like, well, no, we need to leverage your strengths. You might want to develop some of the areas that you're not as strong in, but you need to also use your strengths to get work done. And they would ignore it. And so finally I thought I need to find another instrument that will help people zero in on their strengths, to use them, because that's what will get you ahead, right? If you're actually using what you're good at. So that's really the reason. It's also really good. It's very well researched, and it applies in any context. So it's versatile.
Yeah. For everybody's information, I'm going to be the guinea pig today. Mm-hmm. And I went ahead and took the assessment online. It took less than a half an hour. I can't remember. It seems like there's around 75 questions, something like that.
Something like that. I don't recall.
And they're very simple preference questions between two different choices on each. It didn't take very long, and it was pretty painless. I didn't have to really struggle for any answers. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things that I liked about it right off the bat. But tell us a little bit about the way that they kind of separate the categories. It's like there's a top 5 or mm-hmm. something like that. And then there's up to 34 different categories mm-hmm. of strengths. Mm-hmm. And they run the gamut. I mean, it's, all of humanity is right there in those 34 little colors. Mm-hmm. But talk to me a little bit about how do they determine which ones are the top ones?
That's a great question. That is, in fact, we're going to go through that together a little bit, but there is definitely a formula depending on how you answer the questions where you land on the ordering of them, but it's not necessarily exact. Like your top 5 versus your number 6 is a huge difference, right? So it's more like the top and the bottom, focusing in on the top ones. And we call those your dominant strengths. Those are the strengths that you use every day, all the time. And then we have strengths that are supporting strengths, which are a little bit lower than that. The ones that you might use, sort of like you pull out of a filing cabinet at your desk, you pull out of your drawer and when you need it. And then there might be some lesser strengths where you might have some ability, but it's not something that you go to generally. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that that you don't have any ability in that way. It just means that that's not your way of being necessarily. And maybe it's better to partner with somebody who is, stronger. That is their dominant strength. And so that's part of the intro session, is to go through them and figure out where those lines are for you, because it's a little bit different for everyone. And so you interpret that. But there is a unique ordering of these 34, and you'll find that you are like 1 in 33 million, and even in the top 5 ordering of them.
Wow.
So it is pretty unique. I mean, I don't know, you might run into 33 million people in your lifetime, but I don't know if that's likely if you'll run into someone who has the same setup as you.
Yeah. This podcast is kind of oriented to people who work primarily alone. The whole idea here is that this is a podcast for people who love to work alone. And I'm a big fan of DIY, partly because I like to learn things, and partly because I'm really cheap. Um, so, but it's really helpful for me to be able to understand, like, where are the places that I really need to bring support in, and where are the places where I can be, the primary player and support, not only for myself but for others. So for the folks who love to work alone, this is something that can help them to really understand places where they might want to bring in other skill sets, other strengths, right?
But I would also say that one of the wonderful things about this Clifton Strengths is finding that you can apply the strengths that you have to pretty much any problem. And what you find is that there are multiple paths to get to a solution to a problem. And one of those paths might be pulling in other people, right? But
Yeah.
how you recognize that. But another one might be like, look at salespeople, for example. Often people have the stereotype of salespeople as being really extroverted, charismatic kind of people. But some really good introverted, quiet people are great salespeople. They might show up with all the facts and get the person to say, "Oh yeah, this is the best product," right? So there are lots of different ways to approach a challenge. Yeah.
So the strengths can really inform that. Okay. One of the things that you've hinted at in what you just said is that someone who has a tendency to be on the introverted side, or maybe a highly sensitive person, has their own way of approaching sales. How much is there any correlation between strengths and personality type?
Yes, there you can look at the different correlations and how things, different other types of personality assessments, and you will find some correlations. Yes.
Okay.
And you can even see that in some of them, they are sort of a personality thing. Like, for example, ideation is a pretty strong predictor of creativity, for example, right? And so you might measure creativity in a different way in a different assessment, and it might come out similarly. So there is some of that. I mean, that's what we're looking at here, is some of it's sort of this combination of just sort of who you are and how you come across and how you were raised and how you use them. And we'll also get to the point of this being described as, we're talking about strengths, but really when you look at the report, you'll find that they're called signature themes.
Yeah.
And they're called your natural talents. And so these are kind of raw talents that, and in fact, the way this was developed is the way many personality assessments are developed, which is using a factor analysis.
Right.
And that is basically, you look at all the different things that predict performance in this case, and then they group them together and find out which ones made certain like individual factors. And that's how you get 34 here. So they kind of group together. So you'll find that they do correlate with some other things. We'll get to that in just a minute. Yeah.
That sounds good. Well, as your guinea pig, I actually took the assessment. Gosh, I don't even remember how long ago it was. Maybe more than a year.
2019. I saw the date on the report. Okay. Yeah.
So we started this conversation a really long time ago. But after our last conversation about assessments, I felt like that it would be fun for us to go through this and look at the entire, report. We only looked at the top 5 for me last time, but it would be fun to look through the entire report and see what it reveals. So if everybody can be patient, I'm the one here that's on the hot seat, and we're finding out about who I am and what my strengths are, what I'm about. So I took the assessment. Like I said, it took about half an hour. I took it all online. I didn't have to do anything else. And you get your initial results back immediately, and you can pay extra to get the entire report within minutes. However, I think it's important for someone like Joanie to be able to tell you what it all means. So one of the things that I'm going to mention is that if you want to get in touch with Joanie, you need to get in touch with her at flexibleworksolutions.com. And she's the one that I'm going to say, you don't need to call anybody else for this. You just need to call her. And she can get it all set up for it. So that all being said, Joanie, let's dive in.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I don't know if people are going to be able to see your report, but we can mention what your top 5 are.
Okay.
Strategic, ideation, learner, intellection, and includer.
Okay.
Right. So perhaps people are kind of scratching their heads saying, what does that even mean? Right. Intellection, includer, ideation. So what does that even mean? But they're all different names for each theme.
Yeah.
Right. You have to name it something. And the real richness comes from reading the report, which, as you said, there's like over a page of information on each one. Right. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look through your report and you saw, for example, number 1, your top 1 is strategic.
Yeah. That one was actually a surprise to me.
That's the question. Exactly. Why was it a surprise for you?
I don't think of myself as a strategic person. Mm-hmm. Although my family may beg to differ. Mm-hmm. I always have a really clear plan when I go to the grocery store, and it's going to show up like this, and it's going to be done in 5 minutes, and we're going to be well on our way home.
You're not the browsing type at the grocery store.
Not really. I have my route, and I follow it to a T.
Okay. Well, that's so interesting. I mean, what we would do as we're going through your report is look at the description of strategic and describe what that means. And I think something that's also interesting is that there's not a generic description of strategic.
Yeah.
That theme. It's unique for the different ordering of your strengths. Because I also I validate this all the time, but literally just before our call, I looked up mine because strategic is in my top 5 as well. And there's some similarities in the description, but not word for word. And it's actually significantly different.
Yeah.
So what means for you to be strategic is slightly different than what it means for me to be strategic because of our other, themes that come out. So do you have it open? Do you want to talk through some of the things that come out that maybe mean something to you, that seem like they resonate with you?
So this was mine.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you see on the front page, it lists all 34. You can kind of scroll through that. And they have different colors because they're in different domains that you could also categorize.
Yeah.
And strategic thinking is more in the strategic thinking domain. So if you go down a page or two, you'll get to starting the long descriptions of them. This tells you how to go through your report.
Okay.
Keep going. Keep scrolling down.
Start with the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
Then 6
Which is
to
what
10.
we're doing. Here you are, strategic. Now you can see that it's a full page of, basic description is you create alternative ways to proceed. Faced with any given scenario, you can quickly spot the relevant patterns and issues, right? You just gave that grocery store example.
Yeah.
How about at work, in the work that you're doing? See if you find any of these descriptions that seem to fit.
Well, in the coaching that I do, this really comes to the fore because I can help people. I can help people really identify strategic direction and options quickly. I can help them see possibilities that they don't see themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very often strategic in nature.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that's wonderful about this instrument is that it is help building your understanding of yourself.
Yeah.
And you said, well, I didn't really think of myself as being strategic. And, but yet you're using that talent, that strength that you've probably refined over the years in your work, in your home life, every day.
Yeah.
And you just haven't acknowledged it yet. So sometimes once we realize that we have this strength, we can actively apply it to new and challenging situations that we didn't really think, well, I have no idea how to, do this situation because it just doesn't sound like something that I would really know how to do. Someone says, hey, you want to go rock climbing? You're like, something very different. You know what I'm saying? So, or, I want to market this product. And you're like, wow, I've never thought about nail polish before. How am I going to go through this?
Yeah.
So you might find that you can, oh, well, wait a minute, I'm very strategic. Let me come up with a strategy for this new challenge, right? So you could apply it. Mm-hmm.
I think what I was surprised about isn't so much that it was there, but that it was the first thing. Because I don't often think of myself primarily as a strategic person, but that it identified that as my top strength was the surprise to me.
Okay. Well, you got 4 more out of your top 5, which tend to be the dominant strengths.
Yeah.
Ideation. Fascinated by ideas. You're able to find connections between seemingly disparate phenomena.
Let me get to it here.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Contributing innovative ideas to the group during brainstorming. This one I actually would have probably put on my top if I were the one that was saying, because this is the way that I think of myself more usually.
Right. Certainly come across as a very creative, ideas driven person. That's so much of what you do in your coaching, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so, I mean, number 1, number 2, I wouldn't, like I said, worry so much about the exact ordering.
Yeah.
But the fact that strategic might help you figure out how to or when to apply your ideation.
Very cool. So one of the things that I'm noticing here, Joanie, as I go through this again, is the action suggestions that they have and the blind spots that they're also saying. And I probably need to spend some more time with those.
Yeah. I guess this gets to the point of, okay, so we're talking about them being your raw talents, right? Your natural gifts that you were born with. How do you turn them into refined strengths? I mean, ideation, we're coming up with ideas. How do you apply that to the workplace or make it something that's productive rather than daydreaming about ideas, right? That might not be so productive for getting things done. So there are ways to refine this. And it even says maybe you need this time to just explore. And how do you schedule time to do that? Perhaps each day or each week or whatever it is. And make sure that you are leveraging the strength that you have and also giving time to this need that you have while also attending to other aspects of your work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the blind spots are, too much of anything is usually not so good, right? I mean, with that, unfortunately, a little bit of something is okay, a lot might be all right, but a whole lot, limitless thoughts and ideas, right? If you just keep coming at somebody with them, as it says here, that might be too much. So you have to realize, like, wait, just because I value all this, I might need to tone it down to deal with the person I'm interacting with.
I can get really overwhelming really quickly.
Yeah. I think we all can in our own way, right?
Yeah,
that's
probably
the point here, right? So realizing the ways to pay attention to that, also having that self-awareness. Learner's is another one. I mean, loving to learn is great, but if you get so deep into learning, you may actually not, make some money, or get anything done, right? So we all have to find ways to to learn maybe on the job or learn on the side or in addition to, but it's hard to just get paid to learn all the time.
This is just, there's something about reading this, Joanie, that's so affirming that it's like, I know in the past there have been times that I've kind of, hid my lamp under a bushel and not let this stuff out. And I think part of it is because, some of these things were not necessarily priorities in the places that I grew up in. But just seeing them expressed in this way is quite an uplifting experience, actually.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you hit the nose on was sometimes we have these natural abilities and they aren't valued. They aren't necessarily brought out in you as a young person. And maybe that's why you didn't always realize they were there, or you knew they were there and you didn't think that they were necessarily good or important. But later finding out that, yes, there are lots of different ways to apply this. And you have this talent and you can strengthen it even more now, anytime. It's never too late, right?
Yeah.
It can be, eye-opening and inspiring. Yeah,
This
creativity.
learner,
Yeah, go ahead.
the learner one is one that I really resonate with because that has been something that has been a constant for me from the time that I was really small. Is that I just love learning, and I always had my nose in a book or doing some kind of an experiment or something like that when I was growing up. And one of the things that I loved about playing the guitar wasn't necessarily performing, but it was just learning how to play. It was like it felt good to just learn that instrument, right? So the performance really wasn't all that exciting to me, but learning how to do something was really exciting. And when I became a teacher, learning how to teach something was just as stimulating to me. That was fun.
And I can see in your coaching, you're learning new things all the time because you're learning about people, what they're like. You're learning about their products or their organizations or their context.
Yeah, definitely. So that was number 3. I know there are 34. We're not going to be able to get through all of them, but if we can get through my top 5, I'm going to have some other questions to ask you after we get through that.
Okay. Intellection.
I love how they characterize it as how you can thrive. I like that.
Right.
Isn't that cool?
You're introspective and appreciate intellectual discussions. I mean, like the one we're having right now.
Absolutely no argument there. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You had mentioned before, and I'd never really picked up on it, but it's interesting how they are integrating all of these other aspects, all of these other strengths inform each one. And I really like how they are, you had mentioned that, you had strategic as one of your characteristics, but the way that they spelled out strategic for you was different from the way that they spelled it out for me based on the other strengths around it. And I find that fascinating. Like, driven by your talents, you read to acquire new information, to collect insights about unique discoveries, events, or people. And it's like that to me also, it feeds into the ideation and it feeds into the strategy. Yeah, it's late on a Friday afternoon. Strategy, I'm going to have to go with that. But it's really interesting to see, now that you said that, how those things are informing each other.
And so one of the things I mentioned previously is it helps you understand yourself. But I think another thing that this instrument helps you with is realize the unique combination of skills and talents that you bring to any situation or to a group or, when you're working with others, that we don't always think about, other people are strategic too, or other people like to learn. But the way that you're combined, and you have these talents is really unique. 1 in 33 million, right? So
Yeah.
this is different for you, and it is a very important contribution.
Very cool.
Yeah. I do this a lot with in like teams and workplaces, and it's a great way for people to appreciate each other and their contributions to the team.
I can
Sometimes,
imagine.
yeah. So you can look at what each person brings and the uniqueness of what they bring, and realize that there's we don't always see that, though. Like some of the things that come up here aren't like we're on the checklist of the task to be done for the company, but ideation, bringing ideas,
Yeah.
is really valuable, right? Or learning about something, you could learn something that actually brings great information or a new tool or technique to the group to get something done. I mean, there's a lot there. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So now we're going into relationship building, includer.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've changed colors from green to blue. Is there any significance there?
Yes. Yes. As I said, there are 4 domains. There's the executing domain, which is getting things done.
Yeah.
Influencing, which is, how to take charge, speak up, make sure others are heard. Relationship building is how to build relationships with others. And then the strategic thinking is the 4th one. So how to analyze information and all that. So we'll find that everybody has, more dominant domains and some lesser domains. And that's another way to look at how to partner up with others.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But this is more on the people side now. And this sounds so much like you. I mean, even having a podcast for people who work alone, that's including everyone. I mean, this is like, yeah.
We want to work alone, but we still need each other, kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, you probably find yourself bringing people into the conversation. If you see somebody sitting alone, you might bring them in.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I really, I've seen a couple of times, the propensity for solitude among the strengths that I have. And that, of course, speaks to this podcast, but it also, I had an interesting conversation yesterday with a person about the balance between isolation, or not isolation, the balance between solitude and community. But one of the things that we hit on in that was I've really been working on an understanding of the difference between solitude and isolation.
Yes.
And that isolation is a much more protective kind of a thing, where we're trying to protect against some kind of a painful experience or painful outcome. Mm-hmm. Where solitude has a tendency to be a little bit more reflective and creative, and I would say more growth oriented for me than it is a way of avoiding people. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that solitude comes up in a lot of these strengths that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like right there, sometimes too much solitude dampens your enthusiasm or erodes your ability to be productive. Maybe.
You still need to be, have some inclusion there, and connect with others. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I'll mention. Joanie and I meet with one other person every week, and that's one of the things that I find is a really good source of accountability and connection and creativity and ideas, and just our discussions. Pretty much we never come to it with anything prepared, but we always end with, I think, something valuable or insightful.
Mm-hmm. Part of that intellection that you have there too. You just like the discussion.
Yeah.
It isn't always intellectual, but it often is.
Stretch the circle wider, find ways to get more people involved. Yeah, I can live with that.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been through my top 5,
mm-hmm.
and then they say the 6 through 10 is the next
Yep.
the next level of of strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what starts to happen when we get there.
All right. So the top five are definitely ones that you use every day.
Yeah.
And it's easier to focus in on five because you start focusing on 10 or 12, it starts to get a lot, right? So usually we recommend that people start with five and figure out how to apply those, how to refine them, how to understand them, even. And that's the first step, is understanding, as we're doing a little bit of today. But then when you get down to it, there's usually more, as I was saying. Now, normally in a session, I would go through the full 34 and we would look at the list of them and we would go through to figure out like where you say this is always me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm always like this versus this is sometimes me. And it's not always even the exact number. Now, usually you get down, it often can be 10 to 12. It could be more, it could be fewer. But then you might kind of get to, well, this is kind of, I do this sometimes. And those would be your supporting strengths, as I said, that we pull out when we need them. And then you get down to the point where you get to, this is rarely me. I hardly ever do this, and those would be your lesser strengths. So that's what you have to do, is as sort of refine it on your own here, but this is the basic report. So the top 10 are ones that, as shown by the research, you are using regularly every day, and maybe even a couple more. So positivity is one. I certainly see that in you.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very positive person. And how you can use that. So it's just a matter of, if you get the top 5 report, that's a great amount of information to chunk to work with for a while. But then once you start to do a little bit more, you can get in your top 10. There you are. Yeah. And start to bring those in. And then you might go down the list a little further and, we'd actually have you take out a pen or a virtual, on your PDF version of it or something, and draw a line across it and say, this is where it's kind of the point where I think it's not quite as often. And that's, again, like I said, it's not exact, but generally speaking. And you could do that now, but you might want to spend a little time. There's the last page of your report has the descriptions of what all of these themes are. You could always scroll all the way down, if you want to. I think it's the last page. Almost. Yeah, there you go.
There it is. So it's like a summary of each.
Yes. And so you could go and read a little bit more. Like, what is number 20? Oh, that's 22. Woo. That's always a question mark.
See,
what is woo?
I love that one.
It stands for winning others over.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's a real influencing one.
Yeah.
They love the challenge of meeting new people and winning them over.
Interesting.
Right? Breaking the ice and making a connection with somebody. That's a challenge that they just love. Right? I'm not sure where that is on yours.
22.
Oh, right. That is your number. Yes, 22. So that's, it's a little on the lower ones. I don't know. Is that more?
I wouldn't. Yeah.
Is that a rarely you or a
I would
sometimes
say
you?
it's something that I can step into when I need to.
Yes.
But it's not something that I use every day.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. Mm-hmm. Now we get down to context number 30. It's probably one of the rarely ones. That's more about thinking about the past and history.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not surprised by the ranking for that one for me at all.
Mm-hmm. It's not to say that you can't and that you never do. It's just saying that's not your go-to. Some people, that's up in the top, and they're the people who really want to look at the past and how that affects the present, or dig deep into it and in different ways.
I'm absolutely not surprised by this number here, 34, being analytical.
Analytical. No data. You're not.
I'm not a data guy. It's interesting to me. I mean, I can take data, but I really need it to be in a picture. I need it to be already figured out before I can really understand it. I can't take data and make sense of it. But if it's something where somebody who already has that strength has done it, then I can understand it and interpret it and apply it, you know.
Now, see, this is exactly the point where I would say that's fine to realize where you have these lesser strengths, the things that aren't really dominant or necessarily natural for you, but don't ruminate on those. Don't focus on them.
Yeah.
The point is go to your top strengths, because that's where you're going to be the most productive and most comfortable, and be able to solve problems more quickly using these.
Now, I'm really curious, Joanie. I mean, I know that in the corporate world that CliftonStrengths has become much more widely known and used in recent years. What would you say about including this kind of result on a resume?
Oh, actually, I often coach people in career coaching that I do. I coach them to use information from this report. You can put your list your strengths if you want to, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I actually had somebody just recently, within the last couple of months. I was helping her look for a new job, and we went through her CliftonStrengths, and she pulled information from the report, just like you were looking at, contribute many innovative ideas to the group for brainstorming, something like that, right? And she included some of these descriptions from, that interview question, that dreadful interview question, tell me about yourself. Right?
Yeah.
You're like, freeze, deer in the headlights. How do I describe myself, right? So she just rattled off how she was based on this. And it was, she's got the interview, she got the job. I mean, it's, and putting these kind of descriptions in your resume, absolutely. I mean, as I said, you could just put in there your top 5 strengths. I mean, a lot of people do that and their signature. I mean, I do because I'm a coach, right?
Yeah.
People do that on LinkedIn, but even just using this idea, and one of the ways that we use it is to brand yourself. Yeah. Right? How do you want to be known? How do you want to communicate who you are, what you bring to the table, your unique contributions? Yes, this is great fodder for that. This is great, a tool, the information you can pull from it.
I can definitely see some possibilities for integrating this into my marketing messages and into the way that I sell my services, so that people really can immediately understand what I bring to the table for them. And that's definitely helpful. It'd be interesting to see. It would be interesting to go more in depth with how this would inform marketing. Of course, I'm interested in that anyway. But do you know of anyone who's done any research in that direction?
I'm not sure what you mean exactly in terms of marketing product, yourself.
Well, I'm interested to see, particularly in marketing messaging, one of the things that you have to be able to do is to communicate with a customer. And if you were to communicate with a customer and you were to communicate outside of the language of their strengths, would that make a difference in their reception of the marketing?
Yes. Okay, so that's a great idea. So how you interact with others. I mean, other people use things like the Myers-Briggs or other kind of instruments to help communication or help understand each other. The CliftonStrengths is a tool that you can use for that too. I do this a lot with team building. And as I said, it helps people understand what other team members bring to the table, but it also can inform you on how best to attract their attention or retain their attention or communicate with them in the messaging that they want.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're a strategic person and, I want to come to you with a plan, I might want to have a little bit of a strategy behind that. Or, if I'm looking for ideas, I might, or I'm marketing to you, you'll have an opportunity to generate ideas using this product or something, right? So learning about the person, yes, it's a great tool. Absolutely.
Very cool. Well, Joanie, this has been fascinating, and we've just barely scratched the surface as usual. We never have enough time to get all the way to where we need to go, but I really appreciate the time that you've given to this today and the value that you've brought to people. If a person wanted to go ahead and take the CliftonStrengths, what would you recommend first?
Well, let's see. You can take it for free going to the Gallup website.
Okay.
I mean, not for free. You have to take, sorry, not for free. You have to take it and you can just access it.
Yeah.
But it costs, I think, about a minimum of $15, depending on if you're a student or, just a working adult, up to close to $50 to do it. And you get the results just like you did, Franklin. But if you want someone to help go through it with you, they have coaches at Gallup. I'm also a Gallup certified strengths coach, as you said. And usually, I go through with people, especially if they want to have usually it's a context of what they're using it for. Like, I'm looking to build my confidence. I'm looking to build my resume, my job portfolio. I'm looking to be a better leader or to help my team work together better. So then I might set up a certain number of sessions to work with them. But you can also just have one, just like we did. Usually it's an hour, just to go through it, help understand what it means for you. But having a coach is the way Gallup recommends it as well. So signing up with somebody to go through it with you can be very important way to understand it even better.
That's awesome. Again, I'm going to mention Joanie's website, flexibleworksolutions.com. Is a place where you can find out how to reach her and ask questions as they come up. And maybe you'd even want to hire her as a coach for the CliftonStrengths. We also want to mention, Joanie, that you've just celebrated publication of a new book.
Yes.
And I want to make sure that we mention that before we're done today.
Oh, thank you, Franklin. Yes, it's consulting to technical leaders, teams, and organizations, building leadership in STEM environments. And one of my areas that I contribute a lot is in the technical domain, combining my psychology and engineering backgrounds. And technical folks are often not as self-aware in some of the sort of people sides of things because that hasn't been part of their training. So I can help them with that. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention is Joanie's podcast, Reinventing Nerds.
Yeah.
I've been a guest on that podcast a couple of times, and I proudly wear that moniker. But Joanie, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this time. It's always good to be in your company, and I always am enriched, afterwards. So thank you for being here today. Anything you want to say in closing?
I just say it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your positivity always. One of your top 10s there. So thank you.
Very good. Before I forget, this is something I always forget. If you really like this show, would you subscribe, review, and share it with people that you think might like it? Again, this is Your Own Best Company, and it's a podcast for folks who love working alone, and I'm Franklin Taggart. People who work alone aren't antisocial, at least not most of us. If people think you're weird because you don't want to grow a big company and you'd rather spend most of your time working by yourself, you're just hanging around the wrong people. Your Own Best Company has a Facebook group that you're invited to join right now. We understand the urge to close the door, let your imagination run wild, and stay there until your creative impulse runs its course. We also understand the features and challenges that go along with running a business to support our solo flight lifestyles. Joining the group is free, and it's as easy as clicking the link in the channel description. So go there now and just join the group. Want to hear more where this came from? Subscribe to Your Own Best Company on your favorite podcast app or on the Franklin Taggart Coaching and Consulting YouTube channel. To get in touch with Franklin, send an email to yobc@franklintaggart.com. Thanks for listening.